Hello, good evening everybody. Welcome to our panel discussion event. Today is September 18, 2019. We are in Victoria, BC, and our panel discussion will be discussing protecting blasphemers. So first, I would like to thank you all for coming here today. And I would like to invite the manager of our branch, Dr. Sophie Schulman, so she can welcome you and tell us a little bit about the importance of today's event, which is we are all gathered here today to honor the founder of VSHA and CFI Canada Victoria branch, MD Gail Miller, who passed away last year. So I would like to invite Dr. Sophie Schulman here to say a few words and do the opening speech. Sophie?
This is our first panel discussion that is organized by CFI Vic in honor and in memory of Andrew Guy Mulcahy, who was the founder of the entire Atheist Humanist movement of Victoria. Not only CFIV, but also earlier, before that, Victoria Secular Humanist Association. He was a remarkable person and a World War II veteran, as well as a hero of the Normandy landing. CFIV has established an Andrew Mulcahy Fund to promote and advance all the proceeds from our panel discussion tonight will go to this fund. Therefore, your prospective donations would be very welcome. Welcome to you already. Allow me to welcome you again. Mr. Romano will be our moderator, and with this, I am passing it in his capable hands.
Thank you, Sophie. I will first like to give a brief introduction of each one of our respective speakers here and tell you a little bit about them. Gail Miller, here on my right, is the president of Atheist Alliance International, known as AAI. She is a Canadian activist and an author, founder of the Critical Thinking Project, which teaches basic critical thinking skills to students in developing countries. And she is also the former Atheist Asylum director of AAI. And on her right, there is Armin Navabi, who is a dear friend, founder of the biggest online atheist platform, Atheist Republic. He's an Iranian Canadian ex-Muslim atheist activist, author of Why There Is No God, and a podcaster who co-hosts Secular Jihadists. And on my left, there is Robert Light. Robert Light is the president of the Victoria Secular Humanist Association, our local organization, and the former president of BC Humanist Association. He is a writer, director, and a producer. As of myself, I am the moderator representing Center for Inquiry Canada Victoria branch, and I am an atheist activist from Turkey. I'm a former president of Atheist Alliance International, a Turkish ex-Muslim, and I try to establish atheist organizations in developing Middle Eastern countries. So that's what I do. And today we will be discussing a few topics. As Sophie mentioned before, the importance of today is that this event brings together all three local secular organizations of our town, which are the Victoria Secular Humanist Association, Center for Inquiry Canada Victoria branch, and Atheist Republic Victoria Consulate. So our first topic of today will be Is blasphemy progressive for a society, and is it endangered? First, I would like to set some rules of our panel discussion, which is basically no rules. So yeah, feel free to go, freestyle and jump in, and yeah. So let's start. I would like to start with you and to hear what's your opinion about blasphemy. Is it progressive for a society, or do you think is it endangered in worldwide?
Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're asking for blasphemy, at Atheist Alliance International, we actively seek to get rid of blasphemy because in many countries around the world, blasphemy targets religious minorities or people who are not believers. And so we have a lot of people fearing for their lives, and so I cannot think of blasphemy being progressive. For all of us at Atheist Alliance, we believe in free speech and evidence. These are very critical. They are like the foundations for what we are. So we are constantly seeking for new information, questioning things. Blasphemy does not like that. So yes, for me and for my organization, we are not fans of blasphemy, and we are working to end it.
Oh, is it on?
Testing. Nope.
From under. Yes.
Testing.
Nope.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, such an obvious question. I don't know how to. But obviously, what most people recognize as blasphemy is basically speaking against religious authorities and religious way of thinking. That, I mean, I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't, based on that definition, doesn't think that blasphemy is a good thing. And encouraging, I mean, I think you are against the blasphemy laws, but we're for blasphemy, against blasphemy laws. But yeah, I mean, the more you can encourage blasphemy, the better, because it's a form of dissent against nonsense. Obviously, we think all form of religious doctrine is nonsense, and if blasphemy is a definition of speaking up against it, then the freedom to blaspheme is the only tool we have in our toolkit to be able to go up against it. So obviously we encourage blasphemy. One thing, because it's such an obvious question, I'm going to add something different to it. One thing that we tell Muslims, I mean, I think we should tell other people as well, is that blasphemy, again, I stole this from Ali Rizvi, so let me give credit where credit is due. Blasphemy is sunnah. And sunnah is basically means the way of the Prophet. So in Islam, you learn everything on what's right and what's wrong based on the Quran and sunnah. Basically what Muhammad said and did is sunnah. If it's not in the Quran, you'll find it in sunnah. And Muhammad himself blasphemed against the religious authorities of his time. So did Jesus. So if Islam is supposed to be following the way of Muhammad, then blaspheming is sunnah. So we tell Muslims, why are they against us blaspheming, where Muhammad himself showed them that blaspheming is a good thing. We're just following the way of Muhammad. He rebelled against his religious authorities, and we're rebelling against you because you guys are now the authority. Anyways, that's a tactic that is usually funny, and works sometimes against some Muslims. We were just joking, but sometimes it actually works. No, do you think that works against Christians as well? Blaspheming, Jesus was blaspheming against his religious authorities at the time, so we're doing the same thing.
I agree. It's like, as one of my friend John Richards put it, blasphemy is just like punishing people, for defying the Newton's laws. It's, I think, the same thing.
But don't you think that religious people should be in favor of blaspheming, especially because if we didn't allow blaspheming, then Quran and the Bible and the Torah and all those books would become banned because they all blaspheme against each other. So, if anything, they should be on our side supporting the right to blaspheme. That's their entire books.
What do you think about this?
Hi, I just want to start off by thanking the wonderful organization here, the volunteers, people putting up money to do this. I just want to thank you and love you for putting this together, and thank you very much. Let's give a little hand for that. Thank you. The great Thomas Huxley.
Jane was asking.
What's that?
Jane was asking.
If you guys could just try it without the mic.
No, I think we need the mic so that it makes it into the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, the camera recording.
So, the great Thomas Huxley, who was a friend of Darwin's, he said that all great ideas begin as heresy and end up as superstition. The radical becomes the traditional, the revolutionary becomes the conservative eventually. So what I want to say about blasphemy is agreeing with my panelists. Blasphemy itself is regressive, and the confrontation of blasphemy is progressive. Doug Thomas of the Secular Connections did an awful lot of work to get our blasphemy law taken off the criminal code. I tried, when I was president of the BCHA, to get arrested. I put in the most blasphemous letter. I'll read it to you sometime. I even put ink on my thumb and put it on the thing and said, I sent it in to try to get arrested, and they wouldn't do it. So socially, we had already defeated blasphemy, and now we have legally defeated blasphemy as a law in Canada. The last person convicted of the blasphemy law was 1928, and he was English, and he was handing out pamphlets. Just handing out pamphlets. And he was exiled back to England. So the law could not be exercised socially, and now it has been broken. So my heart goes out to those who speak freely. Without blasphemy, without people disagreeing, societies become decadent very, very, very quickly. And what I like about CFI and the other organizations, Paul Kurtz, one of the founders of CFI, helped to crystallize my thought as that atheism and other ideologies are not just a stance, they're a forward motion. They are a political and a social and an artistic and an aspiration for us all. So we need blasphemy or we will become ossified. Thank you.
Do you think there's a limit to this? Because within our own atheist community, when I burned the Quran and put it onto a video of it on YouTube, and we have had a lot of people from my own camp, from our own community, coming after me and telling me, like, Armin, this is a step too far. Burning the Quran, that's a line that you shouldn't have crossed. What are your thoughts on that?
I always draw the line at flipping over RCMP police cars, so it's well within my...
Okay, that brings us to our next question, which is what is the importance of secularism and humanism in the Middle East? Is it the only way out of dark ages in developing countries of Middle East, or is there other ways, such as modern Islam, maybe one of those? Or you think humanism and secular values is the way out of dark ages for the developing countries of the Middle East? So let's first hear from the Middle Eastern.
You're playing identity politics now.
I do.
I mean, we already tried that, didn't we, in Turkey and Iran, and we saw how Islam made a major comeback. I think when you go against nonsense, you don't try to eradicate nonsense for a more moderate version of nonsense. You stand against nonsense no matter what, whether it's radical or moderate or whatever. And if you allow harmless nonsense without evidence, you're also opening the door for harmful nonsense without evidence. We don't wait for nonsense to become harmful before we stand against it. We stand against nonsense because it's nonsense, whether it's harming people or not. We don't wait for that. Because when you wait for that, then if you open the gates to any kind of batshit, bullshit, crazy thing that people believe in, then you lose control. The only influence that you had on people was when you could have introduced critical thinking skills to give people a bullshit radar to recognize what's true and what's bullshit. Once you pass that filter and you haven't given people that filter, where people land on, it's not really in your control anymore. So you can't be like, well, let them believe bullshit as long as it's not a bullshit that they're going to come and kill me or take other people's rights. Well, you lost. The only opportunity you had was at the logic filter. You don't have much more say after that. And we've seen that time and again. And again, what do you mean the alternative to humanism and secularism? The alternative to secularism is religious influence on people's lives. That's not what we want. The alternative to humanism is what? Focus on something other than improving the lives of humans? No, that's not what we want. There are alternatives, they're just shitty alternatives.
So are you saying that they should go straight to atheism?
Well, no, the thing is that people say, people tell me, people are not ready to go to atheism, they need baby steps, let's use Islamic reform. And what is Islamic reform, what does it mean? It means looking at scripture and lying about what it really means. I tell people, if you want baby steps, there is a more intellectual, honest way to introduce baby steps. All you have to do is introduce doubt and skeptical way of thinking. And even if people are not ready to become atheists, just that tiny seed of doubt is all you need to do. And that's a baby step. And unlike Islamic reform, it's an intellectually honest baby step. And even if you can't introduce doubt, even if you go to a Muslim or a Christian, that you tell them the way you think, and they're still 100% certain, you weren't even successful with the seed of doubt. If you could get them to a position where they accept you, not just as an atheist, but as an atheist that criticizes religion, even if they're still 100% certain about their religion, that's also progress. And that's also not lying to people about what their scripture means. Islamic reform, see, a lot of people say, why can't you be for Islamic reform? They are for women's rights, gay rights, secularism, peace, free speech. I'm for all of that. The part of Islamic reform that makes it problematic is that they fight for all those things, but they give Islam credit for it. An ideology that has been always against these values and is now taking credit for things that it has that is not responsible for. And that last bit is what makes it Islamic reform, and that last bit, it makes it more dangerous. It actually makes it very dangerous because we're fighting against Islam. Islamic reformers are slowing the process. They're keeping their religion and ideology that is against women, against gay rights, against free speech, against democracy, against an ideology that promotes slavery, an ideology that says all of us here should be tortured for eternity. That ideology is staying more relevant because of Islamic reform, and that's why I think Islamic reform is a very dangerous way of addressing the problem.
I would have to agree. I mean, Islamic reform is really not a step forward. At Atheist Alliance International, we have affiliates around the world, and very few of them actually use the atheist word. And they will tell us, they'll say, we can't go there yet. But they do start off with humanism and secularism. We had a group, the Guatemala Humanists, and even though they were all atheists, they basically said in a religious country like Guatemala, they couldn't do it. We'll go with them, right? I mean, secularism, humanism, it still carries the same principles we want, which is, human rights, evidence, critical thinking. And there are feet and eyes on the ground. They're the ones who live there. They're the ones who know. So we go with secularism and humanism. Now, I understand, I think this is from David Silverman, that most people, if you ask them what humanism or secularism is, they don't know it. They know what atheism is. We would wish that more people groups around the world would use it. And we'll get there someday, we'll get there. But I can see where secularism and humanism, I can see where they would work, they would be a starting ground, particularly in places like Central America and Africa. I don't think at this point you could even start with secularism or humanism in any Middle Eastern country. I mean, it's very clear for the 13 countries that basically say if you don't believe in Allah, you need to be punished. So I don't know exactly where you start.
just to be clear, when I'm against Islamic reform, I'm not against humanism and secularism. I actually support those groups. In fact, a lot of Muslim reformists, when they are fighting for secularism and humanism and free speech, I support them and I try to bring more attention to their cause. Again, just because I'm against the Islamic reform part of that's not Islamic reform. The part of it that it makes it Islamic reform is not that they're fighting for secularism and humanism, which I support. The part of it that makes it Islamic reform is when they give credit to Islam for those values.
No.
Yeah.
And I don't think any alternative that is still adhering to a religion is a step in the right direction.
I would like to agree with my friends by saying, where can we reform? Where must we revolt? Let's look at success stories. Where have we been able to influence religion and sectarian violence and brought people together? Well, let's look at Northern Ireland and how they finally made a deal. And Canadians were brought in to destroy their weapons to do that. And now, with Brexit, the Catholics and the Protestants in Northern Ireland are protesting against London because they don't want a hard border. So now they're actually coming together. So that's a success story. When we had to break down the Soviet Union, and they had a kind of a secular religion, I think it was William Durant who said, if you want to look at a decadent ideology, just wait until they put up the pictures and the icons. And it could be Karl Marx, it could be Jesus, and things like that. And where we have to reform, and where we have to revolt, we have to confront. I didn't want any part of the Soviet Union to be left. My people had to get out of Poland. We were refugees on my father's side to get out of there. And so I want the Soviet Union to completely collapse. Now, I was arrested in '93, hugging a tree at Clayoquot. That's a reform movement. We're not completely against logging. We want it sustainable. So that's where you get arrested, go through trial, go to the Supreme Court, and then you're exonerated. That's the Canadian way. I think we have to.
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very sorry. So Canada can play a role in this and say, look, I was talking to somebody involved, one a Palestinian and one an Israeli, and they both wanted peace, and they're part of that 85% in the Holy Land, the unholy land, the crazy land. They both want peace. And I said, we did it in Canada, the French and the English. If you just read our histories, if you just read the history books, we were killing each other for 800 years. And then MacDonald came in, got everybody drunk at the Charlottetown Festival, and now we all agree, and what a great thing we've done. Now, we still haven't reconciled with the indigenous people, and I want to honor the fact that this is unceded land. So we still have those conflicts within us. So let's look at the success stories, where now they're going to have marches in Northern Ireland to the border with Protestants and Catholics. So let's look at our successes, and then we can say, maybe that's how we can break through, by revolt and reform. And I very much agree with the spirit of what both of you have said. Thank you.
Well, I agree to you in terms of, I will give you a Turkish example of what happens with modern Islam. 17, almost 18 years ago, a moderate Islamist, now pro-Islamist, party gained power and took office. And just like cancer, I think that will be, it comes back and haunts you. And modern Islam just, I believe, helps some cells to go underground and, sleep until they develop stronger constitutions and, stronger base, so they can gain power again. And just first they ban teaching evolution in classes, and then you see all these Quran schools popping up everywhere, and then you witness all the education system shifting towards an Islamic education system, and you are, giving more imam graduates than scientists or doctors. So it's like it is a dangerous game, and I believe moderate Islam is the Trojan horse.
Yeah, actually, this is again, you might find it strange that I'm saying this as an atheist activist, but this is the genius of Islam and Christianity. The vague parts of Scripture is not a weakness, it's actually a strength. This is what it allows these religions to, when they are being attacked, when they're taking a step back and better ideas are winning, including Enlightenment ideas are winning against them because they're superior values, they put on a mask because they have the vagueness of some parts of their religion and also the complexity of it allows them to act innocent, and you put this cute face of like, oh, we were always for these values. And they're just waiting there, and then when we're winning and they're on retreat, some of us on our side are like, oh, look, they look so harmless. Let them, like, no, they're weak. This is the time that you step on. When the beast is weak, this is not when you show mercy. This is when you go after it and you kill it while it's weak. But a lot of people at this phase are, give up on it because it seems cute and fuzzy and like harmless, and they don't go the extra mile with us. And we try to show history on what happened to countries that didn't go all the way against these ideas.
One of the ideas we all have to think about in Canada is that the preamble of our Constitution, again, that's the thin edge of the wedge where they just keep pushing and trying to get in, is Canada is founded on principles that recognize the sovereignty, the values that recognize the sovereignty of God and the rule of law. Well, the mullahs in Tehran agree with that.
Yeah.
And now they're using that preamble for fundraising when they want to get funds from the government. Let's shut down forever the Catholic school board. Let's shut down the Protestant school board. Let's not give them a dime. We have better hospitals because we said we're not going to let the religious run the hospitals anymore. I don't want to go to Mother Teresa's hospital. I want to go to the Royal Jubilee. I don't want to I don't want to die on a mat without morphine. That's what she was doing. And it seems nice, but it's a Trojan horse. And we all know what Trojan horses do. So we have to hold that line and move forward. Noam Chomsky once said, if you're going to do a protest, don't react. Don't react, proact. What you want to be able to do is to say, like one of the things I've always wanted to do is to take them to court, to have a lawsuit to say, no, that preamble, and I've talked to lawyers about it, and they've said, it'll cost you $500,000, it'll take 5 years to get there, and the Supreme Court will probably send it back to Parliament, but you'll make millions and millions and millions in advertising, and people will start to say, they'll start to turn, and they'll say, I'm religious, I go to the Catholic Church, but having that preamble in there is religious dogma, and that's how we turn them, and that's how we stop them.
Yeah, well, some of you want to ask questions and have comments. I would like to just make an announcement that we will be doing that by the end, I believe, the last 30 minutes for Q&A. So that's how we'll be doing it. Now, shifting the topic to more, to Canada. Do you think there is a need for more atheists and secular non-governmental organizations in British Columbia or throughout Canada? What do you think about this?
I would say yes, because together we're stronger in an organization. You can do more. And Armin might be bringing in this up later, but he brought it up this afternoon where he has heard the argument that if we get all organized and we have a bunch of groups, how much different are we than really like religion and asking for donations and things like that. But there is a lot of good that comes out of being in an organization and in a community. And when we talk about, when we get into helping people, non-believers overseas who need asylum, it is organizations that will do it, that can become sponsorship groups and take in refugees. As a single person, I can't do that. Even the government kind of says, well, there must be 5 of us in one locale before we can take in a refugee. there's just benefits to be in an organization. I mean, there are benefits, just the social benefits of being in an organization and what you can do with a group of people. Plus, you get all that feedback and, the questioning that we find so valuable to make the group better. So I say yes, we would be able to achieve a lot more. For one thing, we would be able to probably have a couple of groups in BC that could take in some of these refugees. A single person can't do that. A single person could try and get laws changed, but it would be a pretty hard and maybe lonely experience. As a group or a bunch of groups, things like that become more viable.
I think that is a large part of it. Some of us are refugees within our own country because we are marginalized and alienated. Remember in the 1990-91 Gulf War, the Arab Canadians were getting unsolicited visits from CSIS, our spy agency. So what myself and some other friends who were Greenpeace activists, we organized a new group, and when CSIS was having its national conference, we actually went in there and we occupied their office, their CSIS headquarters in Vancouver, and then we put up big speakers about this big on the other side of the street, and we bombarded them at 100 decibels with Secret Agent Man over and over again. And you messed them up. And then we went over to the police wagon across the street and we said, we'd like to get arrested. Could you come over and arrest us? The media can't stay here forever. They said, no, we don't like CSIS, good luck. And I got some of my friends, and they're pacifists, they're vegetarian and pacifists. I said, go inside and sit down. So they sat down. They kept calling the cops, they don't come. If we confront here in British Columbia the churches or any of the other Trojan horse things that they want to do, like they want to go into the schools and teach about peace and love, well, we all know that's the sugar coating of the pill. The poison within it is that you go back to your North Korean authoritarian patriarchal Bronze Age warlord God. The mask changes, but the face behind it is always the same. They tried to do it in New West, and they had people singing, I love Jesus. Well, all we had to do was make 2 phone calls and we shut it down. If you could make CSIS back off by having some of your crazy anarchist rock and roll friends occupy them, they're not as strong. In 1946, when our dear friend Andy Mulcahy came back from World War II, which he won, 96% of Canadians, according to the census, worshipped in a religious building every week. 96, okay? According to the last census, it's now 18%, and it continues to fall. The resistance doesn't take much. So here in British Columbia, we've held the line, we've had protests, we've had to go to the Minister of Education and say, stop having churches coming in like this.
Can I respond to that as well? Okay, so earlier this morning we were talking, and I was mentioning that a lot of people are optimistic, but they're missing an important part of what's happening if they're too optimistic. Because a lot of people are looking at the nuns and the atheists all across the world, and they're saying that our numbers are rising, right? We're winning, demographically we're winning. Atheism is growing all across the world, maybe just a few places, which is where it's the opposite, but most of the places, in the Middle East, in the Arab world, in Iran, in Indonesia, Malaysia, Israel, North America, Latin America, atheism is growing. And we have so many different research that shows that. Even one recently, really good one, BBC posted an article that shows that atheism is growing in the Arab world much faster than we thought. And people are like, great, we're winning, but actually we're losing, because even though we're winning the demographic game, we're losing politically. Governments all around the world are increasing the role and influence of religion in people's lives, even though demographics are working the opposite. Secularism is losing in Israel, in Egypt, in Iran, in the United States, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, even though, and atheist activists in all these countries, in Israel where I was, atheist activists are doing amazing work with very, very little support. Atheist activists in Palestine are doing amazing work with very little support. But they have very, very, very little support because atheists don't take care of each other. This is something that religious people do much better than us. When people go after Muslims, Muslims are there for each other. When people go after Christians, Christians are there for each other. When people go after Jews or Hindus, they're there for each other. When people go after atheists, they're not there for each other. Again, because they think like, if we get organized, we look too much like a religion. Well, great job, you give them monopoly over community to religious people. We had the event, Free Sahel. A fraction of the people that would have showed up if it was a Muslim, a Hindu, a Christian. Like Christians, for example, when people go after, with Christians are oppressed in Egypt, they are. And Christians, you hear about it in every church. They do fundraising, they support each other, they do that, and they should. But why are we not, like, are we proving their point that they have a monopoly over morality? Like, how come we don't care about each other as much as they do? When refugees show up in Greece, ex-Muslim refugees, a lot of them are atheist ex-Muslims, but they pretend to be Christian ex-Muslims. Because they know when they show up and they say they were used to be Muslim and now they're Christian, there are churches and communities and other people that will take care of them. Because as a Christian, they have daycare, they have lawyers, they have food, they have community. As a Christian, if you show up and you say, I'm attacked by Muslims, other Christians are there for you. If you show up as an atheist, there's nobody waiting for you. Because we don't have any of the resources, any of the support, because apparently we don't care.
It's pretty ironic that the number of atheists worldwide is rising. Now about 13% in total, I believe. That's what the latest numbers show. Yet, even though we are like the fastest growing we have ever been in, our history, yet we are still failing to build mechanisms that's gonna help and support atheists around the world. Not only the atheist asylum seekers, but all suppressed people. So why do you think we are failing to create those systems and mechanisms and support each other just like the other organized religions? Why the organized atheism is having a hard time to do that? Why do you think that is?
Well, the main thing people say is like, well, atheism is nothing but a lack of belief in God, so how could we get organized around that? What we say is that we're not uniting over atheism, we're uniting over atheist activism. Atheist activism and atheism are separate things. Atheism is nothing but a lack of belief in God. Atheist activism is the idea and the activities around stopping and fighting discrimination against atheists. In fact, you could be a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or a religious Jew and be an atheist activist. As long as you believe that atheists shouldn't be silenced, mistreated, oppressed, discriminated against for being atheist, you're an atheist right activist. And again, just like you don't have to be gay to be a gay rights activist, you don't have to be an atheist to be an atheist right activist. That's something you could unite around. You can't unite, if you think you can't unite around lack of belief in something, you can unite around that view. And you could include religious people in that, right? You want to say something?
Yeah, totally. We invented religious tolerance. It did not come out of the religions. We invented it. Somebody asked me once, well, humanism, what have you ever done? We shut down the Middle Ages. Okay? So let's, right now you got Salman in Saudi Arabia. He flies in a jet, he uses a cell phone, and he assassinates journalists, and he's in the Middle Ages. In fact, he's in the Dark Ages. And we've got to stand up to that. And I think one thing that could come out of this meeting tonight is, when we're going over and having some drinks, let's talk about setting up a refugee committee study group. That's a great way to do it. How hard is it? What are the nuts and bolts? Somebody, ex-girlfriend of mine, Seema Sharifi, she came from Iran. She had to get out of town because they were going to kill her. And her proof when she went to the refugee hearing was that she was able to get a copy of the death warrant that was out on the streets. And she said, this has got to stop. And somebody once told me that if you're in a free country like, say, Sweden or Canada or other of the liberal democracies, you're worth 1,000 activists back in the countries of the oppressed, simply because you are standing up. And so let's do that. Hey, hands up. Who would like to have a refugee study group? Anybody in favor of that? Hey, put your hands up. Yeah, there you go. I know you're all busy, but we can do that. That could come out of tonight. And that's what you say. That's our solidarity. We're struggling for a future. And we know we can have that future. And William Durant said that, Toynbee said that the great phases of human evolution have been in thought. We used to have superstition. Then we had religion. Then there was philosophy. And now there's secular scientific thinking. We know we're on the path, we're on the right side of history. And by coming together and working with the lowest of the low and the most unfortunate, we will rise higher.
So I just have a point there. So what I'm hearing from Armin and Robert is that we need rallying points to bring atheists there. And, you know, because I live with it every day, I'm saying, what do you need rallying points? These people's lives are in danger, people are in jail. But isn't it a matter, do we have to promote it more, educate people more, say, okay, last year there were 200 requests we received, 50 of these 200 say their lives are in immediate danger. Do we have to personalize it? And it's hard to personalize because if you identify these people too much, then they're in even more trouble. You know, there are silly laws still in the law of countries. And we have a campaign right now where we sued a state governor in Nigeria because he was going to use public funds to build this huge Christian center for 8,500 people. And in the courtroom, the judge sits under a sign that says, you know, believe in God. Well, we have, of course, lost the first round. We're going to keep going. But is it those types of things that are rallying points?
Well, I mean, I think that every single success that our organizations have is exactly what we need to get more people motivated. So the work that you do, every time you have a win, and even if we have a failure, we could like tell people why we failed, because they didn't show up and they didn't support us, right? But I think we are doing our best to be part of the solution. We just need to convince more people to support what we're doing, and I think we do that by having even the small little wins that we have. We need to really market them and show people that there is hope. There is something about an activism that makes a difference. Even if it's in one person's life, that people are like, well, that's so insignificant compared to the whole mess that is out there. But to that one person, that's their whole world. So you take that one person that you made a difference in, and you showed it to the whole world. Like, can we at least have like 2 of this? 2? Maybe 3? Can we get 4? Like, if you could just show those wins, people would get encouraged to support you more often.
And I wonder, and Robert, you were telling me before this, that in your group, you had your meetings and the talks and the cafes, and then you decided to go activism. And maybe that's something in the atheist world. Like, for a long time, we had a lot of conferences, and Richard Dawkins, and we had big speakers, and people were sort of talking about atheism, and maybe debating it, and debating religious people. Maybe it's time now to really flip that switch and say, okay, we've all come out, with Dawkins and Hitchens and all the rest of it. People now know there is this rising group. And maybe the thing is to be like Robert's group. Flip the switch. Let's get into activism and highlight all the different issues that we could be working on.
I didn't start it. Actually, I'm just holding onto their belts and they're dragging me into the future here. We already have an environmental division called EHA, and we're looking at petitions. But last week we started a group called Skeptic up at the university. Woohoo! And I had some young people come and say, well, I'd like to join the group. I'm 18, I just left home up in Kamloops or something, and I'd like to get involved, but gosh, my parents would disown me. So you have a familial refugee situation there. And I said, look, I don't want to change your mind. Okay? I don't want to change your mind, but I do want you to have more tools in your toolbox to think for yourself. And a religious person came up while I was talking to her, and he was talking to me about, there's all kinds of proof for the existence of Jesus. And I said, the difference between me and you is you want me to think like you, and I want you to think for yourself. And the immune system put into these dogmatic ways of thinking is that it is forbidden. You can't go there. In the Catholic Church, it's called anathema. You are cursed, that you cannot go out, and that's how they stop us. So we started a new group. In a day and a half, we got rained out. At Club Week, 100 students have signed up. And this Friday, we're going to have a beer and pop film night, and we're going to show the life of Brian. And somebody came up to our table and said, what are you trying to do? I said, I'm trying to corrupt the youth and be like Socrates and take the hemlock and be remembered for 2,000 years. He said, I'll sign that. So that's the kind of confidence that we can have, because we can say, I can do that in this country and I'm going to do that. So this is a familiar refugee that I was talking to, and I told her, look, I don't care. I said, I'll teach you logic. Just logic and facts alone will help you. And so you can make your own decision in a Socratic way. Because you're not going to end up as a bad person. I know you're not. You already care enough to think for yourself. That's how I got out. Because the Jesuits taught me logic. Don't do that. I'm out of here. So this is the confidence that I feel that we can make these changes. Right now, in the Catholic Church, if they started beheading people in Vatican Square, we would stop it. We can't stop it in Saudi Arabia. We can't stop it in Iran. But this is the courage that we have to have. And if it's part of helping an 18-year-old from Kamloops who's afraid of being disowned, my family, both sides of my family are refugees. My Irish side had to get out of Ireland in 1848 because they were in the Irish Brotherhood, who had some crazy idea of becoming a republic. And we won. And on my Jewish side, we were Jews living in Flanders, and we moved to Stuttgart, pretended we were Lutherans, then moved to Poland, and they got beaten up, and they were oppressed by both fascists and communists. And then finally my grandfather said, Mama, what is the most boring country in the world? And they said, I don't know, New Zealand, Canada. The next day he saw a sign saying, come to Canada, free land, homesteading. Boom, we're out of here. So I've had refugees on both sides of my family. And I feel like a refugee in my own country when I see all these churches. But I know we can succeed. We shut down the Middle Ages in Canada.
So think about you say how we can move forward, but the case that you mentioned regarding Nigeria, the work that you're doing, which side is the free soil? Is it this one or is it that one? So I don't know, how many people here know who Sohail is?
No, who?
Sohail. Free Sohail. So this is a guy that is in prison right now in Iran for insulting Prophet Muhammad. He was on death row for insulting Prophet Muhammad on Facebook. The reason why he's not on death row anymore is because people came out and protested. So if anybody tells you that these protests don't do anything, remind them that this guy is still alive because of that. But then people forgot about his case, and he's rotting in jail. And they tortured him in jail. And now his mom went missing. They went after his mom because his mom was trying still after 7 years, even after everybody forgot, she was still trying to get him out. But this is a blasphemer that the entire world had forgotten about. I looked into articles about him. There was not a single English article about him for 2 years until we started bringing him back on. We started getting people in the streets, and thank you guys for actually participating. We had protests in multiple cities at the same time, people coming out in front of Iran's embassy about Sohail Arabi. Again, it's a small step. I'm hoping one day when people go after atheists, this is what Atheist Republic is trying to do. Right now we're recognizing that there is a silence. When people go after atheists, when people go after other groups, the world screams. When people go after atheists, the world is silenced. We're trying to fill in that gap. We try to be the noise that's supposed to be there when people go after atheists. Because right now it's easy to go after atheists because there's no cost associated with going after atheists. We want to become that cost. We want to become that extra calculation that a country has to do to decide whether or not they're going to torture somebody, or they're going to imprison somebody, or they're going to behead somebody. We want to be part of their decision-making process, even if it's a little bit. And hopefully one day we're going to become bigger. But even though these protests, I mean, for our first protest, I'm happy with it, even though I'm also very disappointed that I expected not that many people to join, but for our first protest, I think it was a big deal because we managed to do it in multiple cities at the same time on the same day. And I'm hoping that this will slowly keep growing. Like one day, when they go after an atheist, the next time an atheist is in prison in some country, or somebody losing their job because they're an atheist, I want them to know that Atheist Republic is going to make a huge mess about this, and they're going to be hearing from us, and they're going to be people in the street. That's how we're trying to contribute. But again, all of these, there's no one single way. You don't have to pick which organization, like you don't have to decide that this is the right way and the only right way. Just pick whatever you think is, either support that organization where you think that you're making a difference, or if you can't find a single organization that is doing what you want, just start your own organization, but be part of the solution.
I would very much like to have last week when we were at Club Week, we did a letter you can send to Justin Trudeau, which is all about stopping subsidies for fossil fuels. How about you and I later talk about a postcard campaign to the Minister of Global Affairs, urging her to bring it up, to say, free so help, make some noise about this and let us know. So that's the things that we can do to unite. The worst thing, the Pope, if he came in here right now, oh no, these guys are getting organized. That's not good. Gee, because you see, on a good day, if you're an atheist, you might agree what year it is. But here we are, we can agree. I say, yeah, postcards, not to Iran, but do it to Chrystia Freeland, because she would move on that. And if she starts getting cards, and she's going to go, well, that's an Amnesty International way of doing things. I would love to start. Hey, hands up again. Who wants to start a postcard campaign to help Free Sahel and send it to Chrystia Freeland? Boom, we're on our way.
Yeah, actually, can we do that? That sounds amazing. After the, okay.
So this brings me to our next question. You are the former president of BC Humanist. So you probably have opinions about this too. What do you think are the major problems in the asylum policies and programs of British Columbia and the government of Canada in general? For example, I can bring up one issue, which is a policy of the immigration division that goes like, if you have a conviction in your mother country, where you're from, which is not a political conviction and it's greater than 10 years, you are automatically inadmissible to make a refugee claim. You are ineligible to make an asylum claim. And, different governments have different approaches on this. For example, the Turkish government sometimes plays it pretty dirty. Like, I will give you this example of Professor Dr. Savan Nishanyan, an Armenian academic in Turkey, a pretty famous guy and an open atheist. They brought various blasphemy and insulting president, prime minister, insulting the regime charges, and he beat all of them. And one day, they brought a charge for violating the city bylaws while he's doing some construction in his home, a larger balcony, and he also another project of doing his own cemetery thing right across his home without getting approval. They arrested him. They kept him in jail for over 4 or 5 years. And I don't know anybody who was arrested for violating city bylaws. And then while he was arrested, then they reopened his old lawsuits, reversed the verdicts, and similar experience happened to me as well. I had charges that I beat a decade ago, and once the government finds out that I established 3 atheist organizations in the Republic of Turkey and in the Republic of Georgia. Then they also reopened my case and reversed the not guilty verdict into a guilty verdict and declared me a fugitive of law. And, along many blasphemy and insult charges. So, what do you think what are the other major problems?
Do you mind if I just rephrase for people that might not have understood what you're trying to...
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So basically what governments like Turkey are doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that even if they want to go after you for your atheism or your blasphemy or whatever, they bring up other charges that is not relevant to blasphemy to go after you, and that makes your asylum seeking process in countries like Canada very difficult, because Canada doesn't give you asylum over, I don't know, something like having a balcony in a place where you're not supposed to have a balcony. But they went after you, they put somebody in jail for balcony-related issues, even though the real reason was atheism or blasphemy or something like that. But then, if they want protection, it makes their job very difficult, because Canada looks at it like, well, you actually broke the law. But that wasn't, is that?
Correct, yeah. And what do you think can be done to, what do you think are the major problems in terms of the facing asylum seekers and the process in Canada, and what do you think can be done to better?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. There were Guatemalan and El Salvadorians who I was on a committee, and we went to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Vancouver, who processed their refugee status claims. And the one was Jose. Does anybody know the I Am Jose campaign? He was accused of being a radical. He was handing out pamphlets on campus in El Salvador. And we started a campaign, got the MP from Burnaby to do that. So we're free. What exactly it would be to deal with refugee claims and asylum seekers here in British Columbia would ironically be a federal issue. But just going to the local office here or over in there, and you duct tape your face and just show signs of the people who are being held around the world, and that would be a protest that's very dignified, very quiet. It could even be a silent protest, but it wouldn't have to come through the federal jurisdiction. The province doesn't have much control. Quebec has more control over asylum seekers and immigration, usually from third world countries such as from Haiti, for instance. So that's what we did for Jose, and we got a 2-year extension on him to stay in Canada and go through the asylum process. So we succeeded on that. We did have some very powerful NDP MPs who got behind it. You can look it up. I Am Jose. People gave testimonials on that. So those are the things that we can do because we're free. That's what, the Constitution is not a piece of paper. It's something that you exercise. It's something that you do. I remember my friends, putting their bodies over seals in the 1970s to save the seals. And we got their attention. I know the guy who was in the Zodiac when they shot that harpoon over his head. And that's an icon at the beginning of the activist environmental movement. So here, we did that with Jose, and we can go over to Vancouver, hook up with the BCHA over there, or anybody else, and go there and do it would have to be probably a very silent, dignified, do that. I was protesting the aquarium all the way back in the 80s, and we used to make a cage, and we dress up like beluga whales, and we would go into the cage and sleep there overnight, and we did protests. So those are the things we could do. Now that was not a dignified protest. We were throwing bananas at people coming. And so sometimes you have to just mix it. It's a cocktail of things that we can do, but we are free, and we owe it. When we struggle for the freedom of the oppressed, we better guarantee the freedom of the free. You know who said that? Abraham Lincoln.
In terms of this, it is a federal issue, and I know that just recently, within the past year, we had received a request from a young woman in Saudi Arabia with pictures of her family had beaten her because she was wearing nail polish and wanted to be free, and the family was waiting for the eldest brother to come home and make the decision about whether to report her to the police. So I took that information and I went to my local MP, and he said, yes, I'll bring it up to, I think it's Hussein, the Minister of Refugees. And then, another point was I was at a BC Humanist picnic in Vancouver a year ago, and somebody from the Maldives showed up, and he said, yeah, my life was endangered, and within a couple of weeks he was living in Vancouver. And to me, the whole thing is just getting really confusing. First of all, for every asylum seeker that we receive, do we have to come up with some kind of protest? Why is one person standing in Central Park in Burnaby completely confused that 2 weeks ago he was in the Maldives, got a threat, or maybe things had been building, and suddenly he's in Vancouver, Canada? Next person can't get in. I would really, really like to know how this whole process works, and how many people, is there a limit to how many people, asylum seekers, is there not? It would be good for all of us to know that. Yes. To know, is somewhere in the refugee and immigration that's saying, we're only going to take 10,000 asylum seekers this year, and too bad for the rest. I need to know these things, and I find the whole thing quite confusing. And some of them don't have to be, it gets confusing because then you get refugees, and they have to have status, but I don't think asylum seekers do. And it's a process that would probably have many of us in tears if we had to learn it. But there has to be something, because I don't know, it's great to be creative, and I agree with you. You got to use whatever tools you've got to get the attention to these people, but can we realistically do that for everybody? Every non-believer atheist who feels that their life is in danger and wants to come to Canada, or other people as well. I don't know, I think this is something our community, again, as a whole, we can go to the government and say, you need to tell us how we can best help our people and how this system works, and so that we can make it work for us.
Actually, I want to respond to this as well. I think figuring out the process actually is a very, very, very good suggestion. I want to compare this to what I experienced in Germany. I don't know how many people here know who Mohammed Hisham is. Mohammed Hisham. So Mohammed Hisham went on TV in Egypt. He was invited on a panel, and on national TV, he announced to the world that he's an atheist. And the host, they kicked him out, and he was visited by the police. He was beaten up by his family, and he had to pretend to convert back to Islam, become very religious for a while, just to be able to survive. Eventually, he managed to get out and go to Germany, where he also announced that he's gay, which makes his case even more dangerous if he goes back to Egypt. And he applied for a refugee status in Germany, and he was denied. Even though he has one of the best cases, he was on TV in Egypt publicly announcing he's an atheist. We're in a country where it's becoming more and more anti-atheist, where they trying to pass laws against atheism. And being gay as well. And he's one of the most obvious cases that if he goes back to Egypt, he's going to have a very, very dangerous situation. His life is going to be at risk. But this is a country where it allows a lot of ISIS sympathizers and a lot of jihadis manage to get in and get refugee status. This guy, an atheist, ex-Muslim atheist gay man, which is one of the most public cases out there, his case got denied. And we're like, okay, there's something wrong about your process. But it becomes, you can guess why his case was denied if you realize that his case manager was Muslim, right? And his translators were Muslim, and it was signed by names like Ahmad, and he's now appealing his case, and he has to wait another 2 years. Well, a lot of his friends managed to get refugee status within months, and now they're living in Germany. He has to spend another 2 years in a refugee camp with other Muslims, and now on German soil, he's pretending to be Muslim. So even though he's in Germany, because he's surrounded by other Muslims, he cannot be open about the fact that he's gay, and he cannot be open about the fact that he's an atheist. In Germany, he can't do that. So figuring out how these cases, I mean, why, when it comes to people that deserve to be protected, I think ex-Muslim atheists should be at the front of the line, and yet you see Islamists manage to get in there, and this guy doesn't manage. And another thing, we have a group in Germany called Atheist Refugees, and they're not getting any donations, and with very little donations, they're doing amazing work. One thing that they realize is that what Germany does is that the refugee camps they have, they put all the Saudis next to each other, all the Syrians next to each other, all the Iranians next to each other, because they think like, well, these people are from the same area, they get along. But if you're an ex-Muslim atheist from Saudi Arabia, the last thing you want is to be in a camp with a whole bunch of other Saudis. So one thing that they're trying to convince the government to do, the government there rejected a lot of ex-Muslim atheists because they're like, okay, they accepted cases for people that were being religiously prosecuted, but these people are, I don't know how stupid they have to be, but they say, well, we can't accept atheists because if you're not religious, how could you be a victim of religious persecution? Even though atheists are the #1 victims of religious persecution. But they're trying to educate the government there about ex-Muslim atheists because that wasn't even on the radar. And they're trying to come up with refugee camps where it's specifically for atheists. And that would be a huge, little things like this are amazing wins for us. Imagine if you have an atheist refugee in Germany, which becomes a hub of new activism once these ex-Muslims make it to Germany. And again, these are the people that we should be on the front of the line. And, I would suggest that even lowering the number of refugees that are accepted for the sake of these people would be a huge benefit. It's a win-win for Germany and other countries because not only you can ex-Muslim atheists are the people that you have to be worried about the least, and at the same time you're bringing in freedom fighters. These are people that need free speech, and they could use your country's free speech laws to promote enlightenment values in countries where they're coming from. It's a win-win for both. It's a win for the refugees, win for Germany because you're accepting the best. People that they don't need to change to be accepted in your society because they already have enlightenment values. And it's a win for the countries that they're coming from because now you're encouraging a group of activists that are promoting these ideas back at home.
I just want to add that when you were talking about the group in Germany, or the person in Germany who looked and saw that all the names that had signed his appeal or whatever were Arab, we have received cases where asylum seekers have made it to the UNHCR to the interview, and the adjudicator at the interview is a Muslim person, and their cases were dismissed early on. So not only do we have to start provincially, but we're going to, we're bringing this up with the United Nations. Who are these people that you are training to be monitors to decide who gets status and who doesn't? I mean, you're basically putting a life sentence on some of these people, and who's monitoring them? Who's training these people? And if you are a Muslim and someone comes in and says, well, I'm an atheist, I have to leave, how, do they have any training to check their bias up the door? And I think that atheists do get, there are a lot of them that are not getting a fair deal because the people that are in the position to judge their status are biased.
We have an election going on now. It comes as a surprise to most Canadians that we have an election going on. I know what the poll figures are for Bernie Sanders better than from my political party. The leader of the Green Party came out a few days ago and was asked, who is your greatest inspiring person? And it was Jesus, a fictional character. And you have Jagmeet Singh, who wears his religious iconography. If I go to them and I said, hey, we're atheist humanists, we want to remove God from the Constitution because God is not a Canadian citizen, how are they going to react? How are they going to react? Are they going to say no? Are they going to say yes? They're not going to say yes. So this is the kind of thing that we can say. I want to now go from this experience tonight and go to an NDP rally. I want to go to the microphone and say, what are you going to do about refugees because they're atheists And by the way, at the same time, I can ask the big political question, would you be in favor of removing God from the Constitution and a parliamentary resolution declaring Canada to be a secular state, Mr. Jaggi, Elizabeth Mays, Andrew Scheer, and Justin Trudeau, a Catholic? You confront them. And that's the way we do it. On a big scale, like removing God from the Constitution, and on a smaller scale saying, what are you going to do for atheist refugees? Because we're the most hated minority, for instance, even in the enlightened West.
Yeah, we're the only group of people that our mere existence is punishable by death in 13 countries. There's no other group that you can say that about. Not just saying it, our mere existence, and all 13 of them Islamic.
Could you name it?
Well, Iran, Saudi Arabia, which ones? Maldives, yeah. I can probably all the Middle Eastern ones, right? Pakistan is not by the government, it's mostly by the people. But you have to give me a Wikipedia, the link to list them all of them. But yeah, it's 13 in total. 13 or 12, depending on, how aggressive somebody wants to be. But again, there's no other minority group that is like that. So we need governments to, like right now, for example, we know that governments have a sweet spot for LGBT people when they want to get asylum, and also women rights activists, which rightfully so. But they haven't recognized yet atheists as a protected class that really needs extra attention. And I think with your connections, we could at least work on Canada to bring this to their attention, because a lot of ex-Muslims, I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot of ex-Muslims are giving up hope on European countries, and Canada is the name that is being tossed around among most ex-Muslims. And I think, given that how a lot of people are putting their hope on Canada, we could try to pressure Canada in recognizing these people, but it has to be done we can't just ask for more refugees. We have to ask for the right refugees while limit other forms of refugees. Like we don't want to ask for more people to come in. We want to ask for more of certain people to be able to come in at the expense of other people not being able to come in.
Yeah, carrying from your example from Germany, we don't have to go that far. It's not much different from Canadian atheist asylum system either. For example, I have been involved with atheist activism for over a decade now, and established many organizations in various countries. And when I applied for asylum in Canada, it was denied because immigration division said they're not allowed to look beyond the conviction. So, and I appealed to it, and the deportation order was issued, and I appealed, and I'm still waiting on it. So, yeah, it's not only like that in Europe or in other countries, but in Canada, it's not much different either. So, helping atheist asylum seekers, what are our organizations doing in regards to that? Would you guys like to briefly talk and summarize what our organization is doing in that regard to help atheist and humanist asylum seekers?
Yeah.
Well, Gail, would you like to?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow, it is tough work. And what we're trying to do right now is, the work is too challenging, and the numbers are starting to increase. And it is 99% from Muslim countries. We got one request from a person in Zimbabwe and one request from a person in Sierra Leone. The rest are all coming from Muslim countries, so that's the focus. First of all, no one organization can do this on their own. So we're trying to build alliances with Secular Rescue from CFI, Atheist Republic. There's just so much to this work, and the obstacles that you face, and then the changing political situation, which then sometimes ends up changing the refugee system. So the first thing we're trying to do is work together. And the other benefit for that is that these poor people in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, wherever they are, where they're feeling threatened, they have to send emails to like 10 or 12 or probably more organizations. That shouldn't happen. I mean, because they fear that they're being monitored, and here they are having to send out more messages, which just increases the risk that they will be identified. We need to sort of centralize this. We have to triage this. We get a lot of requests. We need to, so we're trying to build a triage system where we're vetting people, and people say, my life is at risk. I fear I'm going to be arrested any day. Okay, move them up to the top of the list, and then what actions we employ then are something similar to what Robert was talking about. You're in the MP's office, you're making a case out of it. There are a lot of people that we kind of question, well, are you just looking for a way to come to Canada or something? And so we have to go through the vetting process. The biggest thing we can do here in Canada, and the US has a similar program, and we're trying to encourage groups to do it, and I'm very happy to hear Robert's going to do it. We have a group in Calgary, the Calgary Atheists. They're applying to become government-approved sponsorship agreement holders. That means that once you get approved, and it does take time, it takes about a year, you can identify people to the Canadian government and say, we can support that person. And it takes a lot of work because the government's going to want to make sure you've got the money in the bank to support that person for a whole year, because that person cannot become a burden to society. It's not cheap. It's in Vancouver, they're estimating you must have $19,000 in the bank. But if we had groups across Canada so we take the year to just get all our papers in order, we can help these people. We can pull these people in. And in the US, they have a similar program. We might have to wait for Donald Trump to go before people can actually apply for it, because some of these people are coming from countries he doesn't want. But that's the best way we can do it, to pull people out who are really in trouble. And they don't, I can't be 100% correct if this is correct, but they don't have to have refugee status. They can be in a refugee-like situation. And we need to make these things work for us. When I look at the list of government-approved sponsorship agreement holders, 80% are churches. This is something that Armin said earlier. This is one of the areas they're a lot better at than we are. And AAI, we will help you. I mean, we have set aside several $1,000s as a startup fee for the group in Calgary, and we keep, sort of checking in with them. This is one of the best things we can do, and we need to go to other countries to see if there are programs like that. We also need to find countries that will take refugees without visas. I mean, Canada and all the Western countries, their screening process is impeccable. You're a young male that has really no ties to your home and you want a visa to travel to Canada from Pakistan, you're not going to get it. But there are other countries where maybe the visa requirements are not that hard. And we did have some lady who left Pakistan for Azerbaijan. Maybe there are other countries for them to go. I mean, if your life is in danger, we have to have various actions to respond to each case. We have to have like a whole bunch of tools in the toolkit, because this is difficult work. People just countries are just not sitting around saying, oh yeah, I'll take you. It's a lot of money, and it can be legal work. So at AAI, we're starting to formulate our outreach plan, triage, get groups, look for other countries. And some people, the comment that I'll always remember is somebody, and again, it came from Pakistan, was a guy, he said, I'm dead at 25, but I'm gonna live to 75. This was a person who by 25 realized he was an atheist, but he's gonna live in a country where he's gonna have to live a lie for the rest of his life. And there are lots of people, they're never going to be able to get out. how do we make life more bearable for them? Do we set up secret Facebook groups that they can at least have some companionship, some help if they really need it? That's something we're also looking at.
So the first person that we helped get out was Rana Ahmed. Do you guys know Rana Ahmed? So Rana Ahmed, she took a piece of paper and she wrote on an Atheist Republic, and she went right next to Kaaba in Mecca, and she took a picture of the sign and she sent it, and that picture went viral.
She has both.
Yeah, but then after a while she realized that she wanted to get out, and we managed to do some fundraising. Like, here's the thing, the people that we managed to help are the people that are not just like sitting back like, get me out of here. Like, no, the people that they're actually active people that are trying to figure out everything in single step, and they're coming to you with ways that you could help them. And it was real, trying to get Rana Ahmed is now in Germany safe, and she's the one that started the group, co-founded the group Atheist Refugees, which is now helping other atheists get out. But that was our first case, and we realized how difficult, as you mentioned, this is. And you have no idea how many emails we get at Atheist Republic. We have like email number 304 probably saying like, if you don't help me today, I'm gonna die. And I'm like looking at the email like, fuck, what do I do with this email? Like, I don't know what to do. And you always feel like you're letting people down. But again, one thing that you mentioned that I think is very, very important is that there are a lot of other organizations, and what we're trying to do at the Atheist Republic is figure out, we don't want to reinvent the wheel on every single thing. We try to see what other organizations are doing and how we could fill in a gap that they're not doing in cooperations with them, right? So, right, we tried some creative ways recently. We realized that might not be legal, so we stopped it. But like, we recognize organizations like Secular Rescue or Humanist International, and we like, okay, you guys seem to have the Secular Rescue people, for example, the screening process, you guys seem to have nailed that part. Humanist International, for people that can get out, and how we can help them, they seem to be our favorite organization to go to give us a report that we can see that, okay, this is a legit case, this is not just somebody that's making up stories. They make it official for us before we highlight them. But then we think at Atheist Republic, what we could do is, whether we go to Humanist International or AAI, or Humanist International or any other CFI, what we want to do, we want to become that loud noise that I mentioned, right? So whether it's the case of somebody needing to get out, that you guys have identified, or somebody that is like Sohail Arabi, who is still in prison in Iran and probably would never be able to get out, what Atheist Republic's role would be is to help your organization and other organizations to bring more attention and support to that case by filling the streets, going on creating podcasts, shows, memes, using our 2 million plus community to bring more attention to it. I think that's one thing we've nailed, and I think that's our major role in this whole equation, but in partnership with other organizations.
What we can do is return the compliment and invite this organization and Atheist Republic. I organize the Sunday talks we do a Sunday talk every second and fourth, or anyways, we do 2 per month. What we'll do is, I have a friend who's a immigration and refugee expert, and I'm going to have her come in January or February to give a talk on the actual nuts and bolts that we need to educate ourselves about, and I'll invite Atheist Republic and this wonderful CFI, and we'll get together and we'll have this person there as a resource person, or we'll do it as a cafe in the room back here. So the 2 things that I can propose already is, we'll get a refugee expert in who's worked on this, and then we can also look into a postcard campaign on the issue of freeing Sohail, because that would be really big. We have to think big and we have to think small at the same time. We need, if our atheist movement is anything, it's diverse, and that's our strength. And so by coming together, you get an expert, and then we can talk about a postcard and start that campaign. Or we change our mind and do something else. We can be flexible. We can think logically. We can think openly. We may have values, but one thing we're not is a totalitarian mindset. And we can be very imaginative about that. one of the reasons why we got the Reconciliation Committee to deal with at least some with the residential schools is because the BC humanists were occupying churches during their services. And the police would take us out to the car, and we said, well, why don't you take us downtown? And then the cop says, why don't I let you go? I mean, you can't get oppressed in this country. I'm trying to be a martyr here. We need heroes.
You gotta hang that.
An expert and a refugee expert to come to educate us, because if I want to meet this person and who did the thing, she's an automatic member of the Victoria Secular Humanist Association.
Yeah, you mentioned the Secular Rescue Program of Center for Inquiry, which is led by Matt Krawata and Melissa Kravchak, and I'm also one of the volunteers of the Secular Rescue Program. And they asked me to actually forward a question. How do we find ways to help people that don't involve them getting dumped into an overwhelmed asylum system? Connecting people with jobs, either with secular-friendly companies or in other countries. So, what do you think we can do in that regard?
I'm going to go with Rana Ahmed's suggestion, which is trying to do it in Germany, is by what I already mentioned, by creating an atheist-only refugee hub where they all meet each other. I think the atheists from Saudi Arabia can relate more with the atheists from Iran and the atheists from Iraq more than the fellow Saudis and from their own country. And I think that connection, that's going to you can see by ex-Muslims already where they find each other in Canada, United States, and in Europe, where they find each other. The bonds and the communities that they have built has helped thousands of people until today, even with no resources and no organizations. We are seeing that the rise of atheism in the Islamic world and the rise of ex-Muslim movement is because of these connections that people have built and the activism that they're doing. Like, we have no idea how much content in Arabic is now being made on YouTube for atheists. It's unbelievable. And if we could have these refugee hubs as an excuse for building more lasting, life-lasting connections, it's amazing. First of all, these people will find purpose. Not only a community, a purpose, something to look forward to, and they also don't feel like they're constantly being attacked. I think that suggestion by Rana Ahmed, I think is the one thing that we could replicate in every country. If you're bringing refugees in, put the atheists together.
To help people so they don't just end up in a huge asylum system, there are a few ways. We had a refugee person speak at the BC Humanists last year, and he told me, if you go on the immigration website, if you're willing to live in Nova Scotia, and I thought it would be Northwest Territories or something else, there's a quick something express group. There are certain types of skills they're looking for, and they need people in the Maritimes. So in some ways we have to, and this is what makes the job so challenging, is you have to be looking at everything. Uganda will let refugees work. So you've got to find countries like Uganda where they can go and they can work while they're waiting through the whole process, so that they're just not sitting in a camp or in Turkey waiting for the. And then Onur has started this program where they want to hire a person in Turkey to help the atheist refugees there. That can make it you've got to come up with all these different ways. Everybody would like to work. So we should be looking for those countries where they can. We should also be, asking for donations to send people to school in other countries. That's an easy way to get out, an educational visa. There are lots of different ways to get people to that they can kind of bypass that whole process of sitting around and waiting to get refugee status.
Just as you mentioned, the asylum seeking process is not a fast process. It really takes long time. For example, I've been an asylum seeker in Canada for 4 years now, and one of the crew members who's filming this event from Van Productions is Ali. and he is also an asylum seeker who arrived 2 years after I did. I helped him with his case. He got his residency now, and I will probably wait and for another couple of years or few, or maybe be deported. Who knows? However, what I'm trying to say is, in Turkey, these wait times go up to 7 years, 9 years. And no matter if you do your asylum claim through UNHCR or through directly to the country, it can take long time, long time. So, which brings me to my question. I believe there is also a need for mental health services for people who are stuck in where they are, and those who wait in fear for relocation or asylum or appeals. And I believe Free Hearts, Free Minds is the only organization I know that is aiming to address this. Do you know any other organizations, or do you know what can be done in that area?
We used to have a consulting group for people with mental needs, especially people that felt attacked, alone, ostracized. But then the person that was leading that whole project herself got doxxed and attacked, and she had to go in hiding for 6 months, and we lost her for 6 months, and that whole project got stopped. But yeah, there needs to be more of that. And I know Jimmy Bangish is working on the Free Heart, and he's an expert. But one thing we need to do is the people that actually survive, we need to use those people to go back, because they have been through the process. They have experienced what it's like, and they know the tricks and all the ways. And I think a lot of the people that we're helping get refugee status, I think we should help them with the understanding that once they are here, they're going to now pay it forward and volunteer, so create a snowball effect, right? Like, they need to now put in hours and time to help other refugees. And I think that goes along with building the connection. I think this is actually something that you don't really need to plan. As long as you connect all these atheists coming from these other countries together, they will find ways to help each other. They're motivated to help each other. All you have to do is build a platform and provide ways for them to make those connections. They will figure out the rest. I think all you need to do is just provide the environment.
Which brings me to our next topic. You just mentioned about the Atheist Refugee Assistance Program that has been put together by Atheism Association of Atheism Turkey. Turkey holds the highest number of refugees on our planet right now, and many of those refugees are, some of them at least, are humanists, atheists, secular free thinkers, and it's really hard to find accommodation and job in Turkey for those atheist refugees. So the Association of Atheism Turkey took initiative and got inspired by the Atheist Project of AI and the Secular Rescue Project of CFI. So we decided to start a project where we hire a full-time staff who is fluent in Arabic, Persian, English, and Turkish, who can help atheist asylum seekers to translate their CVs, resumes, to help them to do job applications, to set interviews for them, because these people also lack Turkish language skills, and they really need help in terms of finding jobs. Another issue is accommodation, because in Turkey, which is on paper a 99% Muslim country, but in reality an 85% Muslim country. Now, it is very hard to find accommodation if you're an atheist, because even if you find somebody and if you just keep it to yourself, one day it will come out and the odds are very high that you will get kicked out. We know this from first-hand experience that was experienced by our former board members. and presidents. We all lost our jobs, our businesses, and I was kicked from university where I was working as a research assistant. My friends, they've been kicked from their homes, and due to promoting anti-theism. So this happens. And if you are a Persian or an Arab living in Turkey who is a free thinker, it is very hard as an asylum seeker to find job and accommodation. So what we are planning to do is hire staff that can help in that area. And I would like to thank to Atheist Alliance International, because they are one of the co-founders of this program, as well as Humanist International and CFI, Secular Rescue.
Do you know of Zara K, Faithless Hijabi?
Zara, yes.
Zara is doing that. She's looking at CVs and trying to find career opportunities for a lot of secret atheists or people that are being abandoned by their families, and I think mostly in UK. And she has a team of people reviewing CVs and stuff. Maybe you could be in touch with her organization and see what you can learn from her experience, and vice versa. Again, these are the kind of connections. See, all these other different organizations, they have experimented with things. They failed at some things, they won, and becoming more, I like us communicating like this, because I think years worth of experimentation could be saved by just talking to each other and learning from each other, and this worked, this didn't work, and I think our growth will be exponential if we could work with each other and build connections across companies like this,
So, I believe we can start having questions, and we can have an extended Q&A period. So I will ask for a volunteer to help me with the microphones, and I will be glad if you can just raise your hand if you would like to have a comment or ask a question, and Russo will be bringing you the mic, and I will be glad if you can just keep it to one question per person.
Hi.
Yes.
I was able to get Bible reading out of school as an atheist, because I was working with the Jewish community, and they didn't want it over in Vancouver, and they didn't want it to be perceived to be a Jewish-Christian battle. So I said, well, I'm an atheist, so I'll take it on. So I took that on. But I wanted to make a comment about what a campaign that could be quite useful. Because in 1948, it was the UN Declaration on Human Rights. There was a big discussion about the problem of listing grounds for discrimination, upon which there should not be discrimination. So they very wisely added, and other status, and other, but the UN Declaration on Human Rights is not considered to be legally binding, but the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights has the same thing, but it includes something that would have been relevant in the case with I know another case, I don't know if it was the same one with El Salvador. There was a man living in Canada. There's a man living in Canada from El Salvador, and he had been with the FMLNA in El Salvador. And at that time, the FMLA had become the government, but still he was going to be sent out of the country. And because in all the covenants, there's also, and these covenants are legally binding, it's just Canada has not been challenged on them. Discrimination on the grounds of political or other opinion is also one of the grounds. So I think it would be a good campaign would be to use the other status to include atheism, and I think that wouldn't be.
I think that's something you've been working on, isn't it?
Yes, right now, Atheist Alliance International, we have a campaign called The Right to be Secular. We started with it as a universal declaration of atheist rights. we're starting at the highest level at the UN. The UN has has a charter that talks about people have the freedom to choose their religion. There was a little paragraph or a couple of lines added in that sort of also said, well, it could also be from religion, but it's not stressed enough and it's not emphasized enough. So AAI has now this campaign, The Right to be Secular. And we're getting organizations and people from around the world to sign up that we have the right to be free from religion, not just free to pick a religion. And we're starting at the UN, and that's where we hope to get some stronger wording.
But they should also use the Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, also the Covenant of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. All of them have an addition of other status. And that's already a legally binding document. You could go to the International Court of Justice. I think that would be it.
Okay, I got to talk to you afterwards and write that down, because we do have a person in Geneva right now. And
if I could just make one personal comment, that you were mentioning about having groups across the country. Well, I was studying law in Ottawa, and at Ottawa U, and I made a big mistake of going there because it was run by the not the Jesuits, but I can't remember what religious group, and we had philosophy of law taught by a priest. And I got so upset in the class that I didn't really study at all. And so I got the lowest mark in the class, and that brought my average down. And I went up and talked to the dean, and I said, I'm an atheist, and I don't think this is right. And he said, well, a Jewish student got the best mark in his class, and so that was supposed to prove that everything was okay. And I talked to the student, and he said he didn't understand a word, he just memorized it all and just said, well, it would have been great to have a society of atheists in Ottawa where I could go and get some support. Mm-hmm. And I might have been able to.
We have a consulate, by the way, Atheist Republic, Ottawa consulate. We have a consulate almost in every major city. So if you want to find local people to meet in your area, just go search on Google Atheist Republic consulates. And most cities are listed there. We have a local group. But if your city is not listed there, then you could file an application and we'll start a consulate for your group as well, for your city as well.
Owen, if I could just say one more thing. Also, Canada signed the optional protocol, and in it, it says that if you've exhausted all domestic remedies, there is an international bar which you can go to.
Next question, please raise your hand and the microphone.
Yeah, I would like to address the situation of refugees in Canada from the point of view of someone who's just finished a sponsorship for a Syrian family who were in a refugee camp in Jordan for 3 years. The situation that you present is very desirable, but you're facing an uphill battle. I also started a group of Victorian refugee advocates, and we were successful to persuade the Victoria Council to advocate for a maximum of 1 year to get refugees in. We also got Saanich to unanimously agree to that, and we had a number of other initiatives we were successful with. But you're battling against a huge bureaucracy. Canada, at the time I was really involved in this, were bringing in 30,000, but they have a backlog of 45,000, which I believe is still the case. So the problem with the refugee system in Canada currently is that there was a huge surge of government officials sent to the Middle East, primarily during the Syrian crisis, and they brought in police, they brought in people from every form of government to process refugees from Syria, and they managed to bring in 30,000 within a few months, which we all know about. But after that, they removed most of these people, they brought them back to their previous duties in Canada, so that there is a severe understaffing of people who are processing refugees. And there are many groups in Canada that we are in touch with and working with. There was a very strong group in Toronto headed by the ex-mayor John Sewell we were in touch with, and all of these people were working like us to try and speed up the process. But we made no headway over 2 or 3 years in getting the government to increase the number of people to process the refugees. And Turkey has really no initiative to speed up the process because they're getting paid, or they believe they should be paid by Europe, 2 billion, I believe it is, to take care of the refugees, primarily from Syria, and they have, I believe, close to 3 million. The largest is about 1.5 in Lebanon, and in Jordan. And they're all over. There's 70 million refugees waiting to be processed, and there, I think, the plans that I understand, and this is very, very difficult to get really through the bureaucracy to figure out what really is the plan. But basically, your best process is to work with your MPs, and also you have to, of course, find a sponsorship group that are established. Otherwise, as you say, you wait a year. And the churches are way ahead. The Mennonites particularly probably bring in the majority, and they have huge organization in Vancouver, in Ontario, and in Saskatchewan, where they're very strong. But the Anglican Church here is working with something like 70,000 refugee families, and they, like many religious groups, are very successful. But you can work with these groups. You don't have to be a faith organization. The ICA is non-denominational, and they really control how you process, how much money you need. We raised 90,000, but the ICA only allowed us to contribute 70,000 because they say you cannot favor any particular family. There has to be equality in the amount of money you provide. And so our extra 20,000 was taken from us and given to another family, which we have no control over. The other problems you face is, with the war in Syria still going on, there is a huge humanitarian crisis in that region, and it's spreading out, of course, beyond that into all of these adjoining countries. So I think naturally Canada is trying to alleviate that, particularly after Alan Kurdi washed up on the beach. He was a Syrian, and this promoted the government to act and other organizations. But, you know, unless you get some sort of headline crisis like this, it's very, very difficult to get people to actually get involved and have the government move. So there's incredible obstacles in the bureaucracy, and good luck if you can change that. But you know, it is possible, but I think you need to align yourself with these other organizations if you have any chance of making any success.
Would you be willing to come to that night when we get a refugee expert and be there as a resource person, Michael?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm glad to do that.
I just volunteered you.
I could bring some other people in too, but...
Bring them.
Well, and I want to thank you for that, because I had heard that the system had really got bogged down. We do work with others. I've met with Rainbow Refugees in Vancouver. There is several Unitarian groups across the country that have got sponsorship agreement. It's tough. Everything about the whole situation is tough. We're still encouraging people to at least go out and fill out the paperwork to become a sponsorship. And you know, we need a group to do it just so we can see what that experience is going to be. If it is going to be impossible, which I don't think anything really is, but from the first experience we can learn. And there are other countries who've got similar programs. The US has that program. A group of 5 can become a sponsorship of a refugee. So we just need to pursue it, but I'm glad you updated me on the situation.
You know, the other problem we're facing is the favour families and the favour war refugees, because these people, our family included the father from PTSD, and so many of these people are suffering from those terrible atrocities that were committed, bombing them, shelling them in Syria. And so I think it's fair to say that it's reasonable that the government would favour particularly these people who have suffered so much, have been in refugee camps for years, and also have families, young children. And as much as I sympathise with atheists, you know, I believe it's better to favour a family with young children and get them out of this terrible situation.
Well, the problem, actually, can we get the microphone, because I think we need to move on to other people as well. Okay. But I do think that it's not just about the people that we're helping, it's also about maintaining certain values in the countries where they're coming to. And I think it's important, for the sake of the countries that people are leaving, that we have certain standards about who we're allowing in, especially where certain values are not respected by a lot of people that are coming in. And a major change in demographics, if people are coming in with values that are homophobic, anti-women rights, anti-democracy, anti-free speech, it could alter the values, especially if these people eventually are going to end up voting. It could alter the values of the country in a way where it wouldn't be a safe haven for us doing activism. That's why when we want to be, what I suggest is when you go with ex-Muslims or atheist activists, or at least gay rights activists, women rights activists, you're not only helping people that need the help the most, you're also making sure that the values that you protected in these countries, Enlightenment countries that celebrate Enlightenment values, are not being put at risk. And again, this is for the sake of the countries that people are leaving as well, because defending these values is important not just for these countries, but for the entire planet. Because historically and geographically, it's very unique for countries to be able to accept Enlightenment values, and you don't want to lose that. One thing else I think that people should understand, to help with the fact that the numbers are very high, but the numbers would be very much lower if we understand that a lot of these so-called refugees are not really refugees. They're economic migrants, and they just want to upgrade their lifestyle. And I think if we are more strict with our screening process, it will reduce the cost and all the resources required. I think a lot of people do not want to be strict because they might seem intolerant or bigoted or anything like that. But if you do introduce higher screening criteria, then you will have, with the resources that you have already, you would be able to help a lot of more people that are actual refugees. A lot of people that came from Syria and got refugee status managed to go back for vacation in Syria. Like, how are you going back to Syria for vacation if you said that you can't go back to Syria? I mean, Syria's situation is very horrible, but again, not every single one of these people are actual refugees, and there needs to be much tougher screening criteria for the sake of the people that are actual refugees.
I have to object because there is intensely vigorous screening. In the family we had tested, like many families, their relatives are starving, they don't have their drugs, and my family was being called 3 times a day by relatives in Turkey, in Jordan, in Syria, please help us, we're desperate, we're starving. And
I'm not saying
the pressure on these people is absolutely intense. If they go back, it's usually for humanitarian reasons. To say that it's vacation, I think is a total distortion of what...
I think you misunderstood what I said. I think you completely misunderstood.
That's what you did say.
No, I didn't say there are no refugee cases. Obviously, there are some very legit cases out there that need... There are many examples of cases that are actual refugees. But the thing is, what people don't understand that there are many different experiences. Like, this is something that you address. You want to know what the process is. Because different people get many different experiences with regard to what the process is. There are a lot of times where people experience very strict screening criteria, and they managed to pass it because they were actual refugees, and they met those criteria and they made it in. There are some other experiences where people didn't meet that strict criteria. Why is it that some people are experiencing, why is it that the people are experiencing different criteria? Is there not a single system for everybody? Why is it that some people that actually need help can't make it in, and some people that are obviously not refugees and economic migrants are managing to get it in? And every time we bring this up, some people say, well, my experience was different. Yeah, I know. That's the problem. Why are we getting different experiences?
Because you get different people interviewing.
That's my point.
Biases, and some have just different...
So that's my point. I'm not dismissing your experience. I'm just saying there are other experiences as well. Your experience doesn't represent the entire situation.
I think you really lack the knowledge of this system.
All right,
Next person.
let's agree to disagree then.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next question.
Hello. I heard you mention a while ago, again with regards to refugee situation, about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to mention that I'm the president of the board of directors of an organization called the Vancouver Island Counseling Center for Immigrants and Refugees. And we deal directly with counseling for refugees and immigrants who are suffering through great trauma. And one thing that we've found, I mean, there's, with regards, particularly, I think, the federal government, and also with regards to some of the immigrant and refugee organizations within the town here, there seems to be a real focus on settlement. And let's not try and worry about the mental health component. Because, you know, there's still that stigma about mental health. So, I mean, we've been existing now for about 3.5 years. We don't get any federal money like some of these other organizations do. You know, initially it's just through fundraising and through private donations. And so this is, I just wanted to put forth, you know, you mentioned about the mental health component. So there is at least one organization. We're still struggling.
What's the name again?
The Vancouver Island Counseling Center for Immigrants and Refugees.
Wow, that's a big name. Vancouver Island Counseling Center for
Immigrants and Refugees.
For immigrants and refugees.
Yes, acronym VICR.
VICR.
And we have 20 counselors working with us, about 12 people who are doing the translations. And everybody has been working pro bono for the last 3.5 years.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you see there being a point to having a counseling group specifically for atheists? People that have been shunned by their community and been, do you see any point in having a specific group, a counseling group for that?
Counseling differs if you are a non-believer, right? It's
like if the last thing I want, if like let's say I'm an ex-Muslim running away from Saudi Arabia, and somebody comes tells me like, you know, you would feel a lot better if you believe in Allah and start praying. Like I don't want, like, do you think it's good if you have atheists or ex-Muslim counselors that could relate to ex-Muslims a lot more? Or do you think that's something that is beneficial, or do you think no, it's the same thing?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure, okay.
Thank you. Next question, please. Yes.
Yeah, I might have a question too, but I wanted to make a comment. First of all, I've got a good feeling about getting together of different organizations. After many years of activism, I don't really have time for petty, childish, argument between groups that doesn't take us anywhere. So I'm really, really happy to see you folks together, and I'm happy to meet some new faces that I heard about them on the media and the internet. Armin, I read about him. He's here. He's a fantastic guy. I'm happy to have you. Other speakers from Vancouver. I'm sorry I don't know everybody's name. The woman on the panel. Very, very nice to meet you. I got very optimistic. I have hope that this unification would bring us success and more good news. There is a lot happening around the world, and as a person who is a refugee, I flee Iran, crossed the border to Pakistan, and spent a year and a half in there. I can tell you a lot of things that I've seen. And I had followed as a refugee activist what had happened to people in Turkey, neighboring countries of Iran, in Afghanistan. And it's heartbreaking. Now it's happening in Syria, Iraq, and people are coming up from Saudi Arabia. I think this is a good idea to think of reaching out, but I'll tell you, there are millions. You can't rescue all. What this group can do is advocate, put pressure, bring up cases, and believe me, you could do a lot by highlighting. Like, for example, Suhail. Suhail is not one person. There are many. But once you highlight one, you are putting, you're banging on the name, okay? And it would save a lot. There was a case many years ago, Sakina Ashtiani. She was said to be sentenced, she was sentenced to be executed by Estonia. And the campaign started, 100 cities around the world came out. That was the end of stoning in Iran. There is no stoning anymore. They can't do it. 100 cities came out. So you can do a lot, and I'm very optimistic. I'm happy that I came here tonight. I don't know where all the members are. I think they didn't believe that they could get together. Maybe next time. And what you are doing, you were mentioning, oh, maybe now we've done a lot of education, now maybe we should move into something else. No. Education is always good. Seminars, conferences, gatherings are all good. But you gotta be relevant. And I hear some activism is good. You gotta be there on time. You gotta be visible. You gotta make some noises. You gotta bang on. And I like the ideas of going and questioning the leaders who are openly wearing, religious signs and making comments on religions. This is supposed to be a secular society, a secular country. Where are we going? Are we creating another Islamic Republic or some other, form of religious country? I'm optimistic. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a friend after 9/11. His name is Michael. He's a very, very good assistant director in Los Angeles, and his people are from Lebanon. He remembers the shelling and the missile attacks back in the 80s. And a few days, about 2 weeks after 9/11, he called me and said, "Robert, can I come up to Canada and stay at your place for 2 or 3 months, maybe a half a year?" I said to him, "Get the first flight out." That's how bad it was for him, even in the United States. It came to the point where he actually wore a Native Indian badge to pretend he was indigenous. So he stayed at my place. And I fed him, I took care of him, I gave him a bus pass, and I put money in his pocket. He says, oh, let me work for it. I said, no, then you'd be illegal as long as you're here. And I said, I want you to, I'll just take you in. 6 months later, he went back to the States. So you never know. You just never know, even on a personal level. And when he left to go back into the States, he was crying. And I've never forgotten that. So you never know. You never know when you're going to help out a friend and make a friend.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments. The first one was, I appreciated your comment in terms of the distinction between economic refugees. And I think one, I just want to say it very quickly because we tend to forget what went on during the crisis in Syria and the acceptance of refugees from Syria, that we ignored a whole community that was facing genocide, and those were the Yazidis. But they weren't seen as properly educated, they weren't seen as having a sufficient level of entrepreneurship. So we turned our back on them completely. And a lot of organizations chose to accept that. I just want to make, sorry, is it Gail?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to make a comment. I was curious if there's been any movement. I know there's been some insidious things happening in the States with the Women's March and with the dyke marches in terms of how they've been taken over by the religious right, who call themselves, you know, who flock there under the guise of being called progressives when they aren't. But I know Women's March, Dyke March have some incredible sponsorships and connections. And I'm wondering if there's been any attempt to, you know, to see what they could do, or have they had any involvement in bringing secular humanists, atheists into the States?
You know, at one point a few years back, we were doing more or having more communication with women's movement. That hasn't happened recently because we've been quite busy just reorganizing. We do get calls to take on other things. You know, we had a board member wanting to know if we, you know, should take on some statement on climate change. Right now, our plate is so full with atheism. Certainly, we will work with people together, you know, just as we deal with the refugee situation. A lot of the situations in terms of fighting for human rights and things like that, you're better off to do it as a group. And, you know, in the right to be secular, our campaign right now, the right to be secular, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, actually, thank you. I will let the person know who is running the campaign that he may want to expand beyond just that and to go to some of these groups, like the women's group and other groups. Thank you.
No, good. Let's go drinking.
I just wanted to share a comment from a fellow friend and Turkish-American podcaster, the Ridwan, the apostate prophet.
Yay!
So he wants to make a comment and he wants to ask something too. He says, in the West, progressive circles and liberals in general are very interested in the social progress and emancipation by becoming the counterculture. They oppose traditional values and celebrate those who attempt to free themselves by any method. However, when people from an Islamic culture want their freedom, they are told not to be disrespectful toward Islam and not to be Islamophobic. They are attacked, not supported. They are told to conform with their social norms, and liberal circles in the West show more support to those traditional values, like the hijab or Muslim demands, than to secularist, non-Muslim struggles of emancipation. That is, ironically, a sense of white privilege, where white people want to progress from their perspective, but don't fully support progress among lesser cultures, because they don't want to offend the conservatives and the powerful of those cultures. So, how do you think this can be changed? Because we really need the help of the Western countries. So, what do you think we can do to make a difference in that area?
Well, by normalizing dissent. This is, you know, I tell people, a lot of people come and say like, oh, Armin, you're so brave, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm in Canada. I am free to say whatever I want. How is that brave? And this is why it goes back to what you're saying. I remember there was this blogger in Bangladesh, atheist blogger in Bangladesh. His friend was hacked to death by Islamists because of what he wrote. And the reporter was asking him, are you afraid that you're going to be next? And he was, of course I'm afraid. And then they asked him if he's going to keep writing. And he said, yes, I'm going to keep writing. I'm like, but you said you're afraid. Why are you going to keep writing? And he was like, well, because there's not that many other people that are going to write about this situation in Bangladesh if I don't write about it. So, and I'm looking at that guy, and I'm like, this person, the amount of risks he's taking for the sake of freedom, for the sake of normalizing dissent, is way beyond I would ever be willing to do or dare to do. And this person leaves me no excuse. No excuse for the rest of us here. There are people in Iran, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Indonesia, Malaysia, that are in Tunisia, that are doing exactly what we're doing in Turkey, but at a much, much greater risk to their safety, to their lives, to their peace, than the rest of us. And if they do what they're doing, we have to continue. You know, the more of us that speak about these things, the more normal it's going to become. I mean, think about the drawing Muhammad. It's not as taboo as it used to be, because we turn it into an annual event. Every day, once a year, we all draw Muhammad. Now they're not sensitive as I mean, they're still sensitive, they're always sensitive, but they're not the reaction is not as big as it used to be, because they try to use offense as a weapon against us. We're like, if you think this is offensive, just wait. And we're doing it now 1,000 times more. Now I'm trying to do it with burning the Quran. They're like, okay, the new line is don't burn the Quran. I'm like, okay, let's burn Qurans. Because you don't get to draw lines for us. You draw lines, we cross them. You draw lines, we cross them, so that this whole practice of drawing laws around us becomes obsolete. That's how we fight it. We just cross lines.
And we can create our own debates. We can make them, like, say, for instance, having a lawsuit. It only costs $300 to lodge a lawsuit to remove God from the Constitution. God was not born in Canada. God is not a Canadian citizen and does not have any rights and privileges, including freedom from atheism. So this is the confidence that I have because I live in Canada. You can't get arrested in this town. It's very hard to do. And so we have this confidence, and like I said, you're worth 1,000 activists back in the oppressed countries. And what I want to say coming out of this is I'm going to talk to you about a postcard campaign. Remember Christian Freeland when that poor woman was in, where was she, Thailand, in a hotel room?
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, and Christian Freeland showed up at the airport to greet her. Great. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
The cameras can.
Yeah, okay. So the important thing is that Christian Freeland and others, because she'd like to be prime minister someday, they're willing to do that. They see they don't see a problem, they see an opportunity on this sort of thing. And coming out of this, I'll invite all of you to have a Sunday talk. We will get an expert on refugee and immigration, and we'll also have Michael there as a reference for that as well. So this is about us coming together. And this is something coming back to Andy. Andy fought in World War II. His platoon was the one that went the furthest on D-Day. And Andy, I always said to Andy, were you ever scared? He said, I was scared all the time. So here we are in nice liberal democracy Canada. So let us not be afraid. Let us be confident. And I said to Andy, I said, the last time I saw him, he wasn't afraid of death either. Last time I saw him was Remembrance Day. He was over at the Starbucks, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and oh, it was so frail. And I said, Andy, how are you doing? He said, pretty good. How are you? I said, Andy, your shoulder is so thin, you're so frail. Are you okay? He says, I'm fine. I'm checking out soon. He was in a wheelchair. I said, now, we won't want you to hang around. I want you to get to 3 digits. He says, oh, I won't get that far. And then he told me an old joke. He said, he had lung cancer. Remember, he had one lung removed? And I said, Andy, do you breathe okay at night and stuff? He says, I'm pretty good. He says, what's the one good thing, Robert, about having one lung removed? And I said, let me guess. He says, yeah, cuts your smoking in half. Andy wasn't afraid to die. Andy wasn't afraid to take out the Nazis. Andy wasn't afraid, and so we shall not be afraid. We are confident. We shut down the Middle Ages. We brought in the Renaissance. We took over education. We took over health, and we increased from 1800 to 2000. We increased life expectancy from 40 to 80. People are living better. Whenever we move into a department, we do it better. There was illiteracy up to 1500. 97% of people were illiterate, even judges in England. And we took that over, and now illiteracy is the other way around. So when we move in, we should be confident. Look back at our great successes. And I look forward to the day when they can shut down the refugee committee at the UN. I know we can do this because we've done bigger things. You know? Pierre Trudeau was once asked, what's the hardest... A friend of mine was on a logging, one of those trips down the Mackenzie River with mosquitoes and alcohol. And he asked the Prime Minister after sharing a bottle of whiskey, he said, what's the hardest part about being Prime Minister of Canada? And he said, oh, it's not the opposition. He said, when you see the Prime Minister at a scrum outside the Parliament and they go up those steps and then they turn down to their office, there are paintings, huge paintings, 8 by 12 feet, up on the wall, and they look down on you, of the great prime ministers. And you have no choice on who's going to be there with their paintings. And they look down on you and they say, what have you done? I built the CN. I did this. Laurier, I reconciled animosities between the French and the English. I'm Robert Borden. I'm the only published poet who's a prime minister. What have you done? And he said, the hardest part about Canada is not our problems. It's living up to the successes we have had. And we are going to succeed in this movement. Why? Because we always do.
What a good note to end on.
Center for Inquiry Canada is doing a lot in that regard. And yes, I would like to thank all the volunteers that work for the same cause. Well, today's event is to honor Andrew Guy Mulcahy, and I believe it is a very good. It was a very good opportunity for all the local secular organizations, atheist organizations, to come together. And I'm looking forward for further collaboration between all of our organizations. And before we finish, I would like to remind that events like this is brought to you with your generous donations, and the more donations and perhaps merchandise sales you do, hopefully we will need to bring you better events in the future. So please help yourselves as we are leaving. We have some merchandise products and also membership and other donation opportunities, especially for the Guy Mulcahy Scholarship Fund we are planning to go forward with in 2020. And on a different note, I would like to thank the Wide Awake Media Productions for filming this event and our earlier podcast today. Yes, Wide Awake Media Productions, and one of the, I believe, partners is an atheist activist and an atheist refugee. So it is a very good opportunity to work with like-minded volunteers. So yeah, I would like to thank all of you for coming here today, and we will be continuing our chat in, I believe, Bandmast? Yeah, we are gonna go to Bandmast, and we will probably have some drinks and exchange contacts and see what we can do together in future. So please feel free to join us, and thank you very much to all of our speakers for joining to me today for this event. This is my first event in Canada, so I hope we will be able to do many more events together. All right, thank you very much.